Right, well today we're at Aston Park Fisheries, where me and the boss came a couple of weeks ago to fish the Angling Trust Silver competition. And we thought, just for a nice change, because he's sick of me catching F-rons everywhere we go, we'd come here for something a little bit different. So what I want to go through, I don't want to go through too much of what we did on the day, although that's what we did do on the day. I want to talk about short maggot fishing. I mean, it's been a big thing for me. With F1s for years, it's what we've done forever and ever and ever in the winter, fish maggot short. A lot of the time though, it's many of the things that I've learned through my F1 fishing, I've been able to take onto my silverfish matches, which I do these days. I fish a lot of silverfish matches in the winter just because I like getting bites. I mean, and that short line, it's mega. Do you know what I mean? It's just as it is with F1 fishing at this time of year. Your short line at 5, 6, 7 meters, whatever it is where you can throw bait, it's just a mega line for catching a massive amount of your weight every single match you go to. Whether it's maggots or casters, that varies a little bit, the venues you go to. But so today we're going to fish maggots, and I'm going to show you what I do, the sort of things that I think make a big difference for me to just putting a few more fish in the net. I mean, making me a lot more efficient, getting proper bites and not, do you know what I mean, not wasting time missing bites. There's quite a few little tricks I believe I do, or I hope I do, that put more fish in my net, makes me a bit more efficient for everyone else. So, firstly, I want to go through a bit of kit, same as we always do, talk about some plumbing up, talk about some rigs, and then we're going to catch a few fish with a bit of luck. But it is flipping freezing. I want to get done quick as possible so we can get back in that calf. Right, so with my kit sorted, there's several little key factors that I want to focus on just to make sure I'm doing everything as well as I can possibly do, and I'm going to get the most out of my line. So firstly is where I pick it. Yeah, I'm not hugely affected, probably because of the venues that I'm fishing. There'll be different situations, of course, but I'm not hugely bothered about how far I go. You know, all I really want to be is somewhere that I can feed accurately. I think that's being able to feed accurately by hand is the key factor for your short line. You know what I mean? I don't like feeding with a catty there just because it's a bit, you can't group things or can't feed quite as often as you can when you want to, when you're catching a lot of fish. So I like to be able to feed by hand if possible. But yeah, that's the key thing I want to do. I don't want to go too far, so if the conditions change, I can't reach where I want to go. So that's the first thing I've done. For me, my key area that I'm throwing, my happy area that I throw bait, is my top getting 3 sections. If I'm holding the end of that third section, I know I'm going to group my bait very, very accurately in that area, as long as the weather's nice and it's not too windy in my face, which today it's not. So that's my spot I've chosen. In today's case, it's flat. I mean, it's quite a weird lake this, that I might be wrong because I've not seen enough of the lake yet, but it feels like there's a bit of a gutter. It feels if it goes straight down really, really close, then it flattens off and then it starts to come up about 13 metres. It seems that sort of venue, so you've not really got a slope to fish on, or not at this time of year when you want to get a bit further out. So I'm not worried about one bit about fishing on a slope. I just want a nice flat bottom where I can group my bait, and I'm going to attract a lot of fish into that area. So with all that sorted, I'll talk about that in a little bit more when we start fishing. Next thing I want to focus on is my bristles and my floats. Yeah, it's, I think, a big mistake that I see people doing when they're fishing for either F1s in winter or silvers is using the wrong floats. And by floats, I mean bristles. Bristles are more important than the actual float body itself and the material of carbon. So I'm very, very fussy in that I almost don't think there's a place in civilised, nice small venue sort of thing, commercial fishing during the winter, for hollow bristles. So unless it's proper carp, I mean, again, with F1s and silvers, I think hollow bristles there's just too much buoyancy in them. There's too much buoyancy in a bristle, so there's not enough sensitivity, so you don't see what goes on enough. So I like to change things. I'm actually going to contradict myself, because I've got a hollow bristle in this. I like to change things just to make everything as sensitive as possible, and I have 2 floats, which are my pretty much go-to floats with 2 different styles of bristle. I'll have a solid plastic and I'll have a solid glass bristle, which both of them, because they're solid and they've got no air trapped in the middle of them, it makes them so much more sensitive. And you can see, plus the diameters are tiny as well. I've got a 1mm bristle and a 1.2, I'm going to say that one is. So I've got really nice fine bristles. Don't get me wrong, for a windy, nasty day, I've got a hollow bristle, but it's a 1.2 hollow bristle again, so really, really light. Probably the lowest I'm going to get away with in hollow bristles at the winter time. So it's definitely something I've got to focus on. For something leading on to when I'm going to start fishing that you can see, is that by using the finer bristle as possible, you can see more going on, but it also makes the actual bites more, I suppose, magnified is the word. I mean, it saves you, because you're going to get a lot of indications. In my peg, I'm going to feed loads of bait. I'm going to have loads and loads and loads of little mouths in that peg eating. I'm going to see a lot of little indications on my float, And what I don't want to be doing is striking at everything. I want to be as efficient as possible. So with a really fine bristle, sticking out a little bit, a little bit of bristle out, I can wait for proper bites and I can come back with a fish every go, which makes me more efficient instead of striking at every little dink and every movement I get. So the solid bristle definitely allows me to understand what's happening in my peg a lot better. So it just puts a few more fish in the net. So lastly, with my floats chosen, I'm actually using the two of the exact same floats for what we're going to use today. Last thing I want to talk about is my shotting. Yeah, and I'm going to fish one line, and I definitely believe it's worthwhile in most cases, depending on what species are in your peg, having two different forms of shotting. I mean, it's something I've touched on years ago on F1 fishing short, whether you fish a slow falling rig or a rig that gets the bait down quickly. I think the same thing applies when silverfish fishing, especially in today's case, where I'm fishing a venue with a lot of eyed, a lot of roach, and with different species that are going to be inclined to feed in different ways. So two different forms of shotting are going to allow me to swap a little bit, depending what's in my peg and how they're feeding, and try to make the most of the situations instead of using the wrong rig at the wrong time. What it also gives me, I feel like I'm waffling a bit here, but it also gives me options within one area. Because I've only got that one line fed, my short line, I want as many different options of presentation sort of as possible, because I don't want pegs all over my swim. My swim's all over my peg, pegs all over my swim. I don't want different areas of feed all over the place because it's going to split my fish up. So by having one area of feed and different ways of fishing that one area, it just makes my peg last longer sort of thing and keeps me more in touch with the fish. So what I've gone with, I've got a 412s and a 414s float. So both of them are that little light blue version with the fibre bristle. So both of them are actually wire stems as well, just for a bit of increased sensitivity because it's pulling through a little bit today. And I have a 412s, which we've got what? I've probably got 4.5 foot there. I've got a 412s, which is strung out in the bottom half of the rig, just with number 10s. So that's going to give me a fairly nice fall. I'm not going to catch any fish sort of through the water today, other than the odd little vermin. I'm going to catch everything on the bottom. So this is just going to be a nice little rig that comes in slowly so the fish see it and have it just to hit the bottom. And then my second rig, which is a 414s, I think I was holding the wrong one in each hand then. Yep. Second rig, which is a 414s, is a bulk and 2 droppers. Yeah, it's no messing about. I'm going to get it straight down. I'm going to put that bulk in, put my float right on top of it, get it down as fast as I can, just to be efficient in the times when I don't feel that a slow falling rig is having any benefit. If I'm going to catch everything nice and quick on the bottom, this rig's going to allow me to be 2 or 3 seconds more efficient each cast, which seems so insignificant, but if I'm catching 100 fish, then I've got 200 to 300 seconds more, and I can catch 2 or 3 pounds in that, who knows? I mean, depends how big the fish are. But it just allows me to be a bit quicker at the right time, and hopefully, depending on how the peg behaves, I'll be able to show that a little bit better. But what we're going to do now, I'm going to stop on raffling about rigs, I'm going to feed a bit of bait, and I'm going to show you how I kick things off and just see if there's any fish feeding today. Right, so I'm good to go, and I'm going to start things off, if I'm completely honest, a little bit different to how I'd start my short line any other time. For 99% or less than that, 90% of the fishes I go to, your short line's going to be last 3 hours on a good day. You know what I mean? I'm going to start, I probably wouldn't even feed it to begin with. I'd leave it, fish longer, give myself a chance of catching fish, and then once I understood how the fish were feeding, then I'd start kicking my short line off. The impression I'm getting of this lake though, like I said, about that trough, I think we've definitely got a bit of a deeper water short. It seems that there's more fish shorter than long. So it's actually, for me here, so I definitely don't know enough about this place to know what I'm talking about to get it right. But it definitely feels like you can go straight in on it and catch, which is what I did when I was here 2 weeks ago. I've literally focused on that short line all day. So in this case, because I can't, or because I don't want to like build it up immediately and then drop on it because I've got somewhere else to go, in this case, I want it to be my initial line. So what I want to do is I'm going to start by cupping, which is very, very unusual for me for a short line for catching lots of fish. But what it gives me is similar to a carp sort of mentality, an F1 mentality, is that by keeping things very, very accurate with a cup, I get a quicker start. I mean, I can see what's going on. I've got that tight pile of bait on my bottom, or as tight as I can achieve with maggots in a cup. It just makes things happen faster. Yeah, of course, I've still got the option of throwing some bait over the top, which, to be honest, I've been sneaking a bit of bait in already, and we know there's some fish there already. But it just helps to get fish going in my pegs. There's less chance of me mucking it up by putting them in with a cup than there is if I just throw it instantly, put loads of bait in, when, because it's my initial line, I don't really know how the venue's going to fish. So that's what I'm going to kick off with. I've literally got a little diddy pot on, I'm just going to feed 15, 20 maggots, something like that, just a nice pinch of maggots. I've not got to be as accurate and as perfect and as delicate as I have if I were F1 fishing, and I might want to put 2 or 3 maggots in. I mean, in this case, I want lots of fish in my peg, so I don't mind feeding, do you know what I mean, a decent pinch of maggots to begin with. What are we going to put on? Let's put a red one on to start, just to get a few fish in my peg. Like I said, I'm starting off with my bulk rig, just because what I don't want to do is the initial fish that come into my peg, very, very often than them small fish in silver events, you know what I mean, them little tiny roaches straight in, or roach or hide or whatever. And if I was to start off on a nice slow falling rig, there's a good chance that they're going to intercept my bait, which if there's nothing else feeding, great, I'll swap to that really quickly if no one's catching. But just to begin with, just to see what's going on, I'd rather fish a bulk just to sort of get it down a bit quicker, bypass any tiny fish, but also to be a little bit more stable and help myself, I didn't swing that in very well then, and help myself keep it nice and accurate. Because say to begin with, it's sort of F1 type fishing, I'm just tapping my maggots in and I'm keeping it very, very accurately positioned right over the top of that. So there, what we didn't want. Just say that. I've been chucking it a little bit as we've been getting ready. I've been throwing some bait in, and immediately it's obvious that that loose feed bait going through the water all the time, it brings fish into your bag so quick, them little fish. But once they're there, like I say, I can work out whether I need to catch them for a little bit if nothing's getting caught, or I can change my feeding in a minute to get the fish to do what I want them to do. I mean, to give myself a better chance of coming back with a big fish, or a better stamp fish, I can feed at different times just to stop these little things. That wind got me again then. Just to stop the little tiny fish intercepting my bait as soon as it's in. I mean, it may be that I just have to wade through them for half an hour before the peg actually starts developing. So that's a very typical of an initial line to start on, that you've just got to put up with it. I mean, it's no good trying to make things happen too quickly by feeding loads of bait and trying to catch fish that don't exist to begin with. You have to let that line develop, and a bigger fish to move into your pair, get attracted by the commotion of the little fish and whatever else. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it with just cupping in. I'm going to give it probably 10 casts cupping in bait, just to keep things nice and accurate. I'm going to try not to throw any more bait now, because I've been loose feeding before we went on it, and that really clearly has brought loads and loads of little fish into my peg to begin with, which you can see what I was on about with that little tiny rig. If I had that slow falling rig now, they'd be intercepting it every single cast on the way down, and because the way they feed, you find that you miss a lot of bites and it makes you very inefficient. So at least with a proper bulk down rig to begin with, better. It's going to get it to where I want to be, and just to make me a little bit quicker, put a few more fish in my net by being a bit quicker, so a little bit bigger. You can see there's a lot of fish immediately onto that. That's something else though. What's that? It's a little ID-eyed. So already I'm not happy that there's really clearly loads and loads and loads of little mouths in my peg eating. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to wade through them, give myself 15 minutes, and then hopefully we'll be able to come back when the pegs calm down a little bit and there's some proper fish feeding. We'll be able to focus a little bit more on chucking bait at different times, just to make sure I'm nice and quick. In a minute, there's definitely too many fish feeding. So in a match now, I wouldn't say I'd be off this line. Depending what's getting caught around this lake, I think there'd be a good chance that I'd leave this line and I'd go long. I mean, it's because we're just fishing this one line and we're the only ones fishing on the lake. We've got a hell of a lot of fish coming into that feed. But at this point, I definitely think if I were fishing myself, I'd be off it. I'd probably go to something more selective long. I'd go to a pellet line long or something, try and catch some skimmers or whatever else, and let these fish sort of fill themselves up, if you like. I mean, by fishing it, if I was fishing for 15, 20 pound, which is normally the target on this sort of lake, there's no way I'm going to catch 15, 20 pound of these little tiny ones. So I might as well spend time catching some bonus fish and then come back to them when this peg's good and ready. Right, so I've probably been fishing for half an hour, and if I'm completely honest, it's exactly how I'd expect a silverfish line to be, and it's slowly starting to develop now. I mean, there've been a lot of little mouths in there. For the first half hour, I've had literally, there's one of these every flipping chuck if I want to catch them. And if, like I said, if I were to have used that nice, airy, fairy, slow falling rig, that's what I'll be catching. But what I'm just starting to see now is a few better fish starting to get involved. I mean, instead of those 1 to 2 ounce fish, I'm catching quite a few 4, 5, 6, 7 ounce fish. I mean, a lot bigger. They're starting to show up. And there's a few key things that I've started to do now that mean that I'm hooking them bigger fish more regularly. I'm not missing as many bites. I'm just coming back with a fish as quickly as I possibly can. I'd say that the biggest thing, definitely, first I've got rid of that pot. I was feeding too much bait on too tight an area for the amount of fish that are on my peg, which was leading to a lot of missed bites because all them fish were rushing into that little tiny pile and giving me false bites. So what I'm doing now is that I'm feeding pretty much after every fish or after every other fish, but after I've hooked my bite, or after I've hooked the fish. You know what I mean? Once I've struck, that's when I'm feeding. I'm never feeding on top of my rig. Yeah, if you feed on top of a rig when you've got this sort of, or this amount of fish in the peg and they want to be on the bottom, all it leads to is inefficient. Like I say, I'm going to miss loads of bites. I'll actually do it for you in a minute and just show you. But firstly, what I want to be doing is just put my rig in, and then as soon as I hook a fish and my elastic's out, I want to pull it to the side and I want to feed my bait over the top. Yeah, and what's that giving them? That didn't quite go good enough. That wind got them. What that gives them, it's the maximum amount of time, that wind hasn't half got up, for those maggots hit the bottom. See, the fish are getting a lot bigger now as well, catching some proper roach now. Yeah, which lets them get to the bottom and saves me putting my rig in among loose feed, which creates a bit of a mess. Right, so say I've got a decent fish. So I'm going to have another cast now because I've not fed, or I've fed straight after I've hooked that fish. I'm straight in, right at the back of my feed. That's another thing worth mentioning as well, is that I've gone, like I said, my usual throwing distance is right at the end of my number 5 section. So I'm actually, in this case, I'm holding just on the join of my number 6. So I'm actually fishing just past it. So you can see there, I've dropped my rig in, get a proper bite, I'm back with a fish. Yeah, that's because it's allowed the bait to get down and the fish are on the bottom eating my bait. Whereas if I go in now, I'll probably hook one straight away and make myself look a right wally here, but if I go in, no, I'm going to leave it this cast just because that gusty wind, I'm not going to try and feed when that gust of wind's there because I'm just going to make a mess, so there's no point. So let me come back with a fish. See, I'm not striking at any little indications, I'm waiting for that nice proper bite. So I'm coming back with a fish every single cast. Ooh, they've all gone tiny since we turned these cameras on. But right, this cast, if the wind lets me, what I'm going to do is feed just before I go in. Or, I mean, I could have fed just as I put my rig on the water. And by feeding at that time, as you can imagine now, the speed that them maggots take to hit the bottom, it takes a hell of a long time in 4 foot. So those fish now are racing up to intercept my bait while my bait's right below them. So that sort of thing happens. I mean, the very first cast, straight away, they come up, they're grabbing at the bait, and it just makes nasty things happen. You know, it makes you be inefficient, miss bites, foul look fish. It's just a mess. I mean, so being nice and stubborn with myself and allowing it to get to the bottom, hook a fish, and then feeding. I'm actually not going to again. That wind's just come out of nowhere, hasn't it? Might be forced to get catty out or swap to casters. Oh, a little skim bob. Yeah, by feeding at the right time, you wouldn't believe how much more efficient it makes you. So by controlling the fish and putting them where you want them to be, rather than probably how I would with F1s. With F1s a lot more stubborn, and I'd have to fish how they want to feed, you know what I mean, on the day. They might not want to go down, they might all want to be whizzing up in the air. With silvers, they're a lot more manoeuvrable, I suppose the word is. So feeding at the right times, so the difference that it can make to your peg, it's incredible. The difference between proper bites and just a mess, you know what I mean, missing loads. When I don't feed, it's just lovely. So now that wind's died, I can get a load of bait in. So I'll give it 2 big handfuls of bait. I'm not messing about with little tiny bits of feed. One fell off. I'll give them a lot of bait just to ensure, I got folded over on that one, that every single time I put my bait in, some bait's getting to the bottom. Yeah, it's pointless chucking 2 or 3 maggots in, which is a massive mistake that I saw people doing last time I was on this venue. It's just people being too negative. If you're trying to catch these silvers on the bottom and you've got a massive amount of fish in your peg, then feeding little pinches of bait is never ever going to be the way to go. not with a non-selected bait like maggots. So that's another thing that's, it's just nice, straight in, proper bite. Another big handful. So I'm trying my hardest with that feed, so the wind's just come behind me then, but I'm trying to put all my bait just short of my pole, so my bait's always in one of the baits at the back of the feed. And if it's right in the middle of all that bait, then there's less chance of it getting picked out. Whereas if it's the bait hanging at the back, I'd like to think most of the fish come from the back inwards. So you've got a bit of a better chance of them picking it out a bit quicker. And maybe catch a few of them bonus fish, which often hang at the back of the peg. But say I'm still happy with the way things are going on. We're definitely not quite there yet. It's nice and efficient. I'm probably putting £6 or £7 an hour in the net at the minute. So I'm happy with the way things are going. Do you know what I mean? I'd be more than happy to plod along with this, putting plenty of fish in the net, as long as no one was catching carp and it was a carpy match. So I'm just going to continue to let it sort of develop and let my peg change. So at the minute, there's no reason to change my rig still. I'm still on that bulk rig, so I want to get it straight down. I want to come back with a fish. While them little fish are present, it's pointless putting that little tiny rig through the water. That was a bigger fish then. I don't know what that was. So I'm going to continue with this for a little bit, and then we're going to nip back again once it's developed a bit further. The next stage I think that'll happen on this line is that the bite's going to tail off a little bit. That's what generally will go on a silverfish line, which is actually a good thing, because it'll mean that the smaller fish are starting to, there's a lot less in my peg with a bit of luck. And then that's when we can play about with rigs a bit. Once those bigger eyes start feeding, once the light goes drops a little bit, or it gets later in the day, that's when there's quite a few things we can do with the other rig, just to ensure we're coming back with a bonus fish. But like I say, you can't force it in this situation. You can't try and catch big fish, because they're simply not present. There's too many other fish in the peg. I've just got to wade through these and let the peg develop of its own accord, and hopefully with a bit of luck, if we throw enough maggots in, some of them great big ugly eyed will have a feed later on. Like that. Yeah. So yeah, that's weird. That's the first strange thing I've had happen then, that's actually had it as I've laid my rig in with the bulk rig. Which that could be the first indicator that it might be worth swapping to little girly rig and see if there's some in peg. Actually, on the day a couple of weeks ago, I actually caught some shallow as well. Not a lot. I'd catch 1 or 2 at a time shallow. But as you see, if I can put them in the net instead of these little 2-3 ounce roach, we're going to catch a weight a lot quicker. But we will carry on and see how things go. Right, so we've had quite a few signs on another rig. I've been fishing that bulk and a dropper rig for what, an hour. And so I've probably had 3 or 4 fish now that even with a bulk, that's got a bulk of 5 number 9s on. So it's whizzing down really quick. And I've still been having some eye, definitely the bigger ones, intercepting it on the way down. I think we had about a dozen or half a dozen do it now. So it's seeing them signs starting to happen that allow me to understand that possibly now's a good time to try my other rig. I mean, it gives me a better chance with a slow falling rig. Yeah, one end out of cute, look at that. So it just gives me a so much better chance of catching them 1 or 2 extra bonus fish while hopefully still maintaining a decent catch rate. So I definitely felt that the bulk rig, for the way that the fish were feeding at the time, this is something weird, what's this? This is a crucian or something odd. It's a cruie, Louis! I didn't catch any of them last time. Should have caught him on a bulk rig, really. But yeah, it just gives me a chance at catching different fish. Like I said, fish definitely like feeding in whatever way they want to feed. Not all fish are going to go to where you want them to be. So especially with its eyed and F1s, they can be right moody buggers. And if you're fishing in the incorrect presentation, you can bypass all them fish because they're simply above where you're feeding in your peg and you're whizzing past them. So just by swapping to this rig now, I'm just going to have maybe 10 casts on this rig, and I'm just going to try and fish through the water just to see what is intercepting that bait as it goes down. So by laying it in a long line, just so I would with like a carbon stem float if I was fishing shallow. I can just cling onto it, just let it hit the bottom now, and I can see if any fish are like watching it go down. So that's another one that they're taking it just as it settles, which is a presentation that, I mean, I don't achieve with the bulk because the bulk whizzes down so quick. So the amount of times I've had a peg where, not so much when there's lots of fish feeding, but when it's a bit tricky and you can fish with a bulk and literally catch nothing, swap to that nice slow falling presentation just so the fish can see it. Probably a water clarity thing where it works the best in nice clear water with a nice slow falling rig. The fish you catch that are, no, that's crazy, isn't it? That are in your peg that you would never ever believe. So it's always worth just having that little check and seeing that 3 casts I've just caught double the weight I was catching in the previous 3 casts with the other 8, just through catching different fish. I mean, I'm fishing exactly the same peg, I'm feeding in pretty much exactly the same way, but just by swapping to a different rig that falls in a different way, so I'm catching completely different fish. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to be it's not a constant. I'm not just going to drop on it and catch these fish one a chuck all day now, or I very much doubt it. But what it gives me, it gives me something to sort of rotate. Even though I've only got 1 peg going, I can rotate the 2 different forms or the 2 types of rigs, and it allows me to catch different groups of fish. So as soon as this goes quiet in 2 or 3 casts time, or however long, then I can swap back to my bulk and I can go back to catching a lot more fish, smaller fish, but a lot faster. And then again, as soon as I start seeing the indications that a nod fish might be trying to intercept my bait, even though I've got a bulk or I'm missing a few bites, so I'm getting a few liners, that's time to swap back to this rig, almost like exactly the same way as you would. So another proper one. When you're fishing up and down for F1s in the summer. I mean, it's no different in that you swap from shallow to on deck. This is exactly the same, other than everything's on the bottom. So of course we've got a shallow option, but the colder it gets, the less likelihood of catching any fish shallow becomes. And I'd say with a rig that sinks nice and slowly like this, it sort of gives me the best of both. It lets me catch a few fish through the water, so that I may have caught with a shallow rig, but if I don't get one, at least I know I'm going to get a little roach or a little perch or whatever else once it does actually hit the bottom. So even though I'm still on this slow falling rig, I'm trying to keep my feeding the same as well. That's worth just mentioning, in that I don't want to get out of hand by starting to feed, trying to get my bait to fall with my loose feed. I mean, it's not going to happen. Another proper fish. Yeah, I want to keep things as they were, so I'm still only feeding every time I've hooked a fish, because the fish are responding to bait in that manner. I mean, if I try and change things, then the odds are it's going to sort of upset the apple cart a little bit and things will be a little bit inefficient because the fish will start feeding in a different way. And a proper hide them, I don't mind catching them all day. Yeah, much better ones. Yeah, it's crazy. So suddenly you go from, it's weird, you go from a 2 ounce fish every chuck in the first hour of your session, or your first hour that you're on that line, so now I'm catching what you give me, 4 ounce fish every cast? Well, every other cast I'm catching a 4 ounce one, which, say for silver fishing, that's mega. Still not going to feed. Let's give it one more go. So something had a little go at that right up in the air then. A little movement on the bristle. A little tiny one, that's right. So just as if you were shallow fishing, like I mentioned, it's exactly the same in that you need to feed enough bait to catch both the fish through the water and make sure that you're getting bait down every go. So that there's no place for a little tiny bit of bait. It's a good 20 to 30 maggots every single cast I'm feeding, just through what you can see. I mean, there's so many fish feeding, it's dead clear they're all getting eaten. Mine's getting eaten within 10 seconds of being in the peg every cast. So there's no reason that every other maggot I'm feeding isn't. So it tells you that the fish are there and allows you to feed. So if you're not getting bites, a little hide. If you're not getting the bites, then of course that's the time to scale back on numbers, feed 10 or 5 to 10 maggots every cast maybe. But still, the importance of that bait falling through the water in bringing new fish into your pegs. It's vital. So there's constant little groups of fish swimming around the lake all the time coming into your feed. And if you've not got bait falling through the water for these type of fish, you're not going to catch. They're not interested in piles on the bottom. They want to see stuff going through the water all the time. So we're going to carry on with this. Hopefully you've learned a little bit with that. So I'm going to carry on for another hour because I still think there's a bit of a change. And the next exciting thing that unfortunately we can't film for is hopefully a few bonuses are going to feed. That's my favourite bit without doubt for this style of fishing, is that we were just talking about it a minute ago, is the unknown sort of thing. Nearly every single time you go on a silverfish match, on your caster short line or your maggot short line, you always hook something weird. So I'm going to catch a 62-pound sturgeon today, that's the plan. But so as soon as that light starts to fade, this line's really going to come into its own, and with a bit of luck, a few big fish are going to have a go. But by then Craig will have gone to the pub and left me to it, I think. So we've had a mega day's fishing, to be honest. We've had what? We've probably had about 3.5 hours fishing. 3 hours fishing with a bit of filming involved. And it's been mega, do you know what I mean? It's been such a nice change going through catching some silverfish and catching a bit of all sorts. We've not had a special one show up, unfortunately. We've not had a random elusive sturgeon or anything like that turn up. But it's been a proper pleasure. So Aston Park for silver fishing. I've only been here twice now and I'm mega impressed with it. So hopefully we're going to have a little look at what we've got now. And I'll show you what we've caught, or what Craig's caught, because I haven't really done much fishing. But I'll show you what we caught. Say a couple of hours fishing, it has been mega, and hopefully you've learned a bit from it too. Right, so we've had a lovely 2 or 3 hours fishing. You know what I mean? Loads and loads of bites, which is, you know what I mean, that's all we're after. You know what I mean? These sorts of days, you feed loads of bait, be nice and busy, stay warm, because it's flipping freezing today. You know what I mean? But them little changes that we've done, they've just allowed us to be that one word that I keep using, that efficiency all the time. That you're going out and come back with a fish rather than missing 2 bites or whatever else. I mean, playing about with your rigs and your feeding, I mean, it just lets you keep in touch. I mean, we've had some proper fish at the end, it proper changed. And them little tiny fish that we started off catching, everything changes bigger just by letting the peg sort of develop itself, messing about with your rigs, messing about with your feeding. I mean, it's just so you can work out the best ways to put the most fish you can in your net. I'll say it's been a lovely day here again at Aston. So unfortunately, I've got to wait until next year to get back here, but yeah. I mean, a mega day silver fishing, and hopefully you learnt a bit from what we talked about.